What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Enjoying the Review. I'm your host, Incomparable Zach Jones, and it's been another week and another great episode of Severance. So today I'm going to be reviewing and recapping Severance Season 2, Episode 2, entitled Goodbye, Mrs. Selvig. As always, if you guys haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. It costs nothing, but means the world to me. You can also subscribe in audio form on your podcast catcher of choice. Leave thumbs up, positive reviews, all that good stuff. And if you guys would like, you can follow me on social media on Twitter or Blue Sky at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. All right, guys, let's get into it. I really liked this week's episode. In fact, even more than last episode. I'm going high on this. I think I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Really, really enjoyed it. We got some answers to some questions. We got some good mystery, what's Irving up to, introduced. And I'll say this. I'm going to give myself both a pat on the back because I predicted something correctly in my last review, but also maybe I need to wear a dunce cap because there was something I did not pick up on in the last episode, which I now am very highly leaning towards is true, and I just totally missed it. So what am I talking about? Okay, on the plus side, on my last review, I said I didn't believe the whole, newspaper article about the four Audis, became celebrities and they pushed for any rights and all that stuff. And sure enough, this episode, it was revealed that was, not true. And so pat on my back for that one. The thing is, I don't like to go on social media and see what people are saying before I do my reviews or anything like that, So I went online and people were talking about how the Helena character, was most likely infiltrated the severed floor. So it wasn't really Helly, it was Helena. And I'm leaning towards thinking that theory is correct. Because for one, they took out the security cameras last episode. And it's like, well, that makes sense then. They don't need them because now they actually have a spy on the floor. And then there's a couple small things this episode that happened that I'll get into in the recap that I think also they're more subtle, but I think they do support the theory that she is indeed a spy. Because, they had this whole scene in the last episode where, she lied to him and said, oh, when I woke up, I was just in this apartment or whatever, and I talked to the gardener. An obvious lie, but my way of thinking, that didn't totally make me, think that it was Helena, just because, you could kind of see how Helly would be maybe uncomfortable admitting to the others that she's an Egan. She might be hesitant to do that. So, and who knows, maybe they are playing coy and she's not a spy. But like I said, I'm after a few things that happened in this episode, I think that probably is the correct theory. I also mentioned Irving. He gets on the payphone, has an interesting conversation on there, and it's like, I think there's definitely something up with Irving because, like I said, we towards the end of season 1, when the finale, he opened up his chest with his military stuff in there, but he had already had a list of the other severed employees. So I'm thinking that he's on a mission of his own, and I don't know, if he's working for someone else or what his end game is. But I think the Audi version of Irving definitely is up to something. But lots of intrigue. I will say, I'm really glad they didn't draw out the mystery of what happened in the intervening time. I thought they might do that. I'm glad that this episode was just like, nope, we're gonna show exactly what happened. So I appreciated that. I like that better than like that being like, something, a mystery that they maybe dribble out over time. I like that they just like, no, showed us, and I thought it was really good. So those are my top level thoughts. Should we get into the recap, guys? Okay. So like I said, we're picking up the events right at the end of season 1. So Marc's sister realizes that he's back to being himself. And I thought this was something I probably should have saw coming, but totally didn't, because, the whole thing that they went out on season 1 is him screaming, "She's alive." And, we just kind of figure that they're going to be like, oh, Gemma, his dead wife, is alive. But no, they had the whole thing where like they thought the baby was in danger, and when he yells at like most of the people there, just think, oh, he's referring to the baby. The baby's alive. So like I was like, oh, that's clever. It's something I should have like maybe saw coming if I thought about it more, but it kind of sideswiped me. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I could definitely see how they could confuse that. We get a scene with between Helena and her father, and he calls her a fetid moppet, which is a interesting insult. But at the same time, like, I don't know why he would be so upset, because it's not like it was her fault at all. It was totally something that was out of her hands. So that's interesting. You definitely, between the scene and the scene that happens later on, you get the feeling that she has a pretty cold relationship with the people in her life, and doesn't really know what it feels like to be loved. She has this security guy with her that's going to make several appearances during the show. And he basically says, we need to find out who the innies talk to and what they know, We get a scene where Dylan's Audi is walking out of Lumen, holding his head in pain because, of course, end of season 1, Mr. Milchick like tackled him, So Helena tells Milchick that they need to find out every word that they said and who they said it to. She relays the message. And then Helena meets with Mrs. Cobell. She apologizes to Miss Cobell, and, after Miss Cobell basically says, I deserve an apology, she apologizes. And she offers her a job, a promotion, she says, to the Severance Advisory Council. So Cobell's like, I've never heard of this. And she's like, oh, well, it's a totally new position. And, we'll appreciate your input with your experience. Patricia Arquette, she's very good in this role. And you can see, like, she's visibly angry that she's no longer the head of the Severed Floor. And she says she will think about taking the new position. You almost got the feeling that they were just doing her a solid, because she did basically, save their butts at the end of season 1. But it almost feels like I've heard, like, in Japanese culture, a lot of times, like, older employees, they'll give them what they call like window facing jobs or whatever, where like they keep them on the payroll, but they give them like these jobs where they're not really doing much. And so maybe that's like kind of what they're doing here. But I'm sure, like, she's very smart. She's definitely a schemer, and so I'm excited to see what she does during the season. So Mr. Milchick gets on a motorcycle, and I thought this was interesting. The license plate has like an image of Keir Egan on it. Again, like the culty stuff in this show surrounding like the Egans is like very odd but very interesting at the same time. And so then Helena gets on her laptop and she basically does a damage control video, saying that, you know, I think she says she mixed alcohol with some sort of like rash medication, and that's what made her say the things that, you know, Helly, the any version of her, said in front of everybody, you know, saying that, you know, the innies were under terrible conditions and all that kind of stuff. So Mr. Milchick pays a visit to Irving at his home. By the way, it's wintertime and Mr. Milchick is riding around on a motorcycle. Seems a little bit dangerous, but, you know, I guess he lives dangerously. So yeah, he visits Irving's home and he calls him Mr. Bailiff. And at first I was like, does Irving have a secret life as a court bailiff? But then it was like, oh no, it's just his last name, Irving B. You know? So Milchick is basically trying to pump him for information about like, hey, did you know, see anything out of the ordinary? You know, this type of stuff. Milchick ends up firing Irving. And, you know, Irving's like, you know, come on, I have money upstairs, like I can pay you, like, you know. And I think Irving, you know, with him, it's not that he needs a job. It's, you know, he's on whatever secret mission he's on, and so he wants to, you know, keep the position because of that. So now Milchick goes over to Dylan's house. And he tells him that the reason he was hurt is because he was in a physical altercation with another employee. But he says that Dylan was the aggressor. And so they have no option but to fire him. Which, of course, kind of devastates Dylan. Okay, so now we go to Marc's house. So Marc's sister, she seems suspicious of who he was referring to when he said she's alive. And, you know, both Marc and Rick and both believe he was referring to the baby. He's like, you know, who else would I be talking about? And his sisters were like, well, you know, you were looking at the photo of you and Gemma. And they kind of dance around this, like they don't have this. Because he's like, what are you even saying right now? You know, so they kind of dance around it right here, and they'll have a more blunt conversation about it later on. But then Milchick shows up at Marc's house, and he interviews Marc and his sister, and he tells them about the OTC contingency and what happened. And, you know, Marc's like, you never told us about this. And he's like, oh, it was in, you know, your employee handbook. And that might be true, because I gotta say, I get those, everybody gets those at their job. How many of you guys actually read your stupid employee handbooks and all the fine print in them, you know? So Devin, Marc's sister, questions Milchick about Mrs. Cobell, because, like, why was she at their house? Why was she posing as Mrs. Selvig, as Marc's neighbor? And he says that they learned that she is quite severely unwell, and then Milchick promises that she will not bother Marc at work or outside of work ever again. Milchick tells Marc that he hopes to see him on Monday, and Marc's like, yeah, I don't know, man. This was pretty weird. I thought this was an interesting line. Milchick tells Marc that any Marc was very brave, and he would hate to see him reward his bravery with non-existence. So basically really laying on the guilt trip to Marc that, hey, like, if you don't come back, you're basically killing your innie, which is an interesting, way to think about it. We see that Irving discovers his map that his innie wrote Bert's name on during the end of season 1. Okay, this scene is kind of what I was referencing earlier, and I found it interesting. So Helena is studying footage of Marc at work, which again, I think this lends a lot of credibility to the idea that Helena is indeed spying on the severed floor. And she stops on the footage of Helly kissing Marc, and she kind of watches it over and over again. And you can tell that she is very emotionally affected by it. And, I think the idea here is that, like I mentioned earlier, like her relationship with her father and the people in her life seems very cold. She seems probably very unloved. And here she is seeing a video of a version of herself, like being loved. And I think that definitely psychologically, does a number on her. And it probably makes her very kind of intrigued to go down on the severed floor and kind of feel that for herself. So if she is indeed the spy, it'll be interesting kind of to see how her character, takes interactions with Marc and the others over the course of the season. This was a bit odd, I thought, but it gave us like a small bits of humor. Dylan gets a job interview at a door factory, but it falls completely apart when they learn that he was severed. I don't know how I feel about this because, like, I kind of think like if the severance procedure was real in our world, I definitely think there would be like ethical debates about like, think about the life of the innie version of you and how terrible that would be and everything. But this guy's there seems to be a weird prejudice against severed people, where like this guy's like, we don't want people that are like split themselves in half. I forget his exact dialogue, but I'm like, I just don't think people would care that much that somebody was formerly worked a severed job. So I thought that was odd to me. I don't know. What do you guys think of that? It just struck me as weird. But Dylan does get a call from his wife, and she seems very supportive of him. So it seems like he's like in a good relationship and everything. Okay, so now Marc has lunch with his sister. By the way, they eat at this Pips restaurant, and he got in season 1 he got like because he got banged up at work, and they gave him like a free gift card to Pips. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in the perpetuity wing, like there was an Egan who was either named Pip or that was his nickname. So there's like a weird reference there as well. So she says she thinks there's a way to confirm what Marc's innie meant. And she tries to tell him that she thinks she can get a lawyer. I believe she gets cut off, but I think what she's basically saying is she thinks she can get a lawyer that would be able to petition to allow her to have a conversation with Marc's innie. But Marc kind of interrupts her and says that, he's quitting the company. And, she's kind of like, are you sure? And he's like, I thought you would be happy. Like, you've always wanted me to quit working there. But now she puts it out there, the thing they were kind of talking around at his house, that like she's wondering, like, could you have been referring to Gemma? And Marc's like, no, like I identified her body. And he talks about how, and she's like, she says something about like, Gemma's death affected her, and this makes him angry because he's like, you didn't have to like smell her scent in your bed for like 6 months afterwards and all this kind of stuff. So he gets upset and leaves the restaurant, and we see that Helena's bodyguard was in the restaurant, monitoring them, probably trying to overhear the conversation and everything. Marc keeps on looking out his window and monitoring Mrs. Selvig's house to see, if she comes back. Okay, so this now is probably the other scene that intrigued me the most in this episode is Irving. So Irving goes out to a payphone, which tells me already that he believes Lumen is listening in on his, and any calls he makes from his house. He goes to a payphone, and I believe his dialogue mentions that any Irving got the message. And so I'm not sure if he's talking about the fact that his innie would have seen the paintings of the dark hallway, or because of the map, and Bert's name and everything. So I'm not exactly sure what he was referencing there, but it definitely intrigues me. I'm like, I definitely want to see what Irving's deal is. While he was in the payphone, a vehicle pulled up and was watching him, and your first thought is, oh, Lumen's spying on him. But in fact, it's revealed that Bert, Christopher Walken's character, was watching him and like with tears in his eyes. And so I don't know if after Irving, was pounding on Bert's door, if Bert maybe followed him. Maybe we'll find that out in the future episode. But somehow Bert became, I'm guessing it had to be something like that, right? Like after he pounded on Bert's door, Bert followed him or something like that. So now Milchick shows up at Marc's house with a gift fruit basket with a pineapple in it. And he wants him to come back to work, so he offers him some incentives. First, he offers him a 20% raise if he returns. He also offers to do a full investigation into any Marc's claims and give regular wellness checks to any Marc from independent organizations. Milchick mentions Gemma's name and how she was Marc's motivation for being severed. And he tells him that inside Marc is happy and does not have the pain that he sees on outside Marc's face right now. He tells him that inside Marc has found love, and his solace down there will make its way to Marc on the outside. Now, he's definitely trying to kind of, lay it on thick and guilt him into coming back to work. But there definitely does seem to be somewhat of a bleed effect between the innies and the outies, as we saw in Irving, where when he's at work, he starts seeing the blotches of black paint, and of course outie Irving is somehow getting the vision of the dark hallway. So there is definitely a bleed effect, between them. So maybe what Milchick's saying isn't totally wrong. Maybe on some level outside Marc would get some of the vibes of inside Marc, So Marc does decide to come back to work. Helena tells Milchick that they need Marc to go back to work long enough to complete Cold Harbor, which, coincidentally enough, the last episode ended with a computer image of Gemma, and I didn't notice this until I saw a still of that image online, but it does say Project Cold Harbor or something like that on it. So that's interesting. I don't know exactly what the connection there is. Some people theorize this online that because there's an emotionality to the numbers they're dragging and dropping, that maybe they're like changing somebody's personality, or maybe that, I don't know. I really have no idea what the whole number thing is. I don't even have a good guess. But it seems like, Gemma, Miss Casey, is maybe is connected somehow to this Cold Harbor thing. So Milchick and Helena listen to the tape where from last episode, where Marc like plugged in the speaker and was trying to talk to the board and get his team back. And so Helena's security guy says that the board is going to give Marc what he wants, because he doesn't think he'll finish the project without getting his old crew back together. So Milchick hires back Irving and Dylan, and he gives them the pineapple fruit baskets. So as Marc is walking towards the building, they are throwing Mark W. Out of the building, and he is kind of like, cursing Lumen. So we did find out, I was wondering last episode if, maybe those 3 new employees were like totally fake and there wasn't other plans. But in the conversation between Milchick and Helena, he mentions like, I can take 2 from branch 5X, and like there's this other guy from a foreign factory or whatever. So apparently there are other looming companies with severed floors. So Marc goes down the elevator to work, and then we get a montage of the other 3 going down to work. And of course, we saw last episode that play out when they get out and meet with Marc and everything. We do see, like, when Helly gets in the elevator, like, she seems very nervous. And so that, I think that might be just one more indication that it is indeed, like, Helena, like, psyching herself up because, she's playing the role, of the spy and everything. So, back home, Marc sees Mrs. Selvig at her house and confronts her. He's like, what's going on? She tells him that he's so easy to sway and that they got him to go back to work for a pineapple. So she gets in her car and tries to drive off, and he gets in the way and blocks her. And he asks her if she knows something about Gemma. And she doesn't say anything, but Cobell seems visibly shaken by him saying her name. And then she just honks her horn and speeds off. But it definitely gives us the sense now that outside Marc has turned a corner and now thinks that, hey, maybe my sister's right. Maybe Gemma is still alive. And, like I said, great episode. Makes me excited for the next episode. I think this show just continues to hit on all cylinders. The performances are great. The writing is fantastic. And to be honest, man, like, having large delays between seasons is very unfortunate. But if it gives time for the writing to be better, writing above all, above direction, above acting, writing is the biggest determinant of whether a show or movie is good or bad. It really is. Those other things, do they have an effect? Sure. But writing is king, guys. It's number 1. And so far, man, this show, the writing, top notch. So definitely shout out to the writers on this show. Great stuff. Guys, that's it for season 2, episode 2. Do you guys have any theories from what we've seen in this episode? I'd love to hear them. Comment down below. Let me know. But guys, just one more reminder, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you prefer audio, you can subscribe on your audio podcaster service of choice. But leave thumbs up, positive reviews. All those things help me out. And you can follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Zach Jones Live, ZachJonesLive. But guys, until next time, I hope you're enjoying the review. Bye, guys.